This video is brought to you in part by Squarespace. Hello there, I'm Nick, and this is the Game Apologist, where we look for the good in bad games. But don't let dramatic Sonic fans on Twitter tell you otherwise. Sonic Superstars is not a bad game, but I am still going to talk about it on this show, and let's be real, it's more just a channel name than the actual concept anymore, but hey, I'm still trying to use it where I can. Anyway, yeah, Superstars is a good game. Not great, not bad, not even mediocre. It's good. If I had to give it a number score, probably give it like a high 6 or a 7. That becomes an 8 the more you play it. Can be frustrating at times, but it is fun to learn, and it is designed with repetition in mind, just like the old Sonic games were. But it does feel like a game I should be bored of. And what I mean by that is, at this point, I should feel worn down and tired from this branch of the franchise. I've said it before about Mania. Brilliant as it is, if it had released in 1997, the game would have been ripped apart. It would have been called Tired, overdone, and dull. But Mania didn't release in 1997. It released in 2017. And it's been over half a decade since that game released. Superstars feels like it should have been like the third or fourth side-scrolling game since Mania. It feels like it should be the new Super Mario Bros. Of Sonic games. Because even though I do say this game is good, and let's be real, it's easily the most polished Sonic game we've had in years, make of that what you will, for a grand majority of Sonic enthusiasts, I don't think this will be anyone's favorite Sonic game. Janky as some of the 3D games can be, Superstars doesn't match the spirit or the more out there ideas of the fan favorite games, and it won't be a part of the argument over who should wear the side-scrolling crown that Sonic 2, 3K, and Mania constantly fight over. Is it better than the Dimps games? For the most part, absolutely. But again, it's not doing anything as unique as, say, the Rush games, and other flaws aside, if you preferred the art direction of the Advanced trilogy or certain movesets of certain characters, which I'll talk about later, I can hardly blame you. This is a middle-of-the-road Sonic game in a world where solid, complete Sonic games are few and far between. I mean, there is always Sonic stuff coming out, and fun stuff too, but we haven't had a completely original Sonic side-scroller since, I don't know, Sonic 4 Episode 2? Does that even count? It has as many original zones as Sonic Mania, if you think about it. And yes, I know we are getting Mario Wonder releasing right next to Superstars, and there will be comparisons, and God, I do love seeing a callback to a once vicious corporate rivalry, now played off in a more fun and friendly fashion, and more between the fan bases than anyone else, because I would love to see Sonic compared to Mario's quality, like it used to be. That just pushes the IP holders to get more creative and do better, and in turn, we get better games. Everybody wins in that scenario, but in 2023, that's not exactly a fair comparison, and it hasn't been for a very long time. Mario Wonder only had one question to answer. What will this game do differently to make it stand out from the new Super Mario Bros. Line of games? And you can call Mario mid all you want, Sonic fans. The sales speak for themselves. Nintendo does not care. Everyone knows what to expect from Mario, and that is a good-ass game. No matter how safe or experimental, no matter what physics are tweaked between titles, the baseline standards for that series is high-quality platforming that's polished to a ridiculous degree. That's why it really doesn't take more than an elephant and some bubbles to wowie-zowie the pants off of game critics and the general public. They got me with this Fly River Turtle Koopa. Look at that cutie. But when you look at Sonic's camp, the first and biggest question will be the same one that's been asked for every side-scrolling classic-style Sonic game since Sega stopped making consoles. Did they get the physics right? Bland as they may sometimes be, nobody is ever worried about the overall quality of a Mario platformer. But with the Hedgehog, the fanbase is constantly worried about if the game will even feel like Sonic. And what's more frustrating about the physics question is that it even has to be asked again, because they nailed the formula 6 years ago with Mania. But in the years that followed, a new question formed. One which inevitably led us back to that physics conversation. That new question being, where the hell is Mania 2? Just when Sega starts to feel predictable, they hand off their Hedgehog to Arzest, who has always been the developer of the most okayest games in any franchise. But hey, it's got Sonic's original designer who directed the game that's fairly consistently at the bottom of most classic game tier lists, and also they made Balan Wonderworld. I understand they had a lot working against them for that project, and while they will unfortunately have to be associated with that title, I do think Yuji Naka took most of that reputation with him to jail. But all the same, I'm gonna be real here. Considering that Wonderworld was specifically designed to recapture a long-lost Sega vibe with Sonic's creators at the helm, and then having a bomb as bad as it did, I don't know how Iizuka looked at those guys and thought, yeah, alright, let's give Sonic to them. I have to imagine there is just an old friendship going on between these Sonic vets. Maybe Naoto needed a favor, I don't know. But my point is, even if they are trying to sell Superstars off the idea that a bunch of Sonic veterans are coming together to help create this project that was tried just a couple years ago with Balan, and man, oh man, that did not go well. And be it with Balan or with Sonic Team themselves, I'm sorry, but the old guard has proven less than reliable many times over with this franchise. And looking at Arzest and their library of franchise fillers, you can see why some fans were worried. And hey, look, the likes of Yoshi's New Island and Hey Pikmin are nowhere near as bad as some fans will make them out to be, but they're not going to be at the top of any ranking list for those series. You seeing a pattern here? So yeah, I was one of those fans that was a little concerned about the game quality, let alone the physics. But all the same, yeah, that was also the first thing I was asking about this game. And it's the same question that has been asked since, ironically enough, they started using the classic formula as a sad attempt to get Sonic back to basics. And don't get me wrong, they nailed it hard a few times over the years. But again, every time Sonic and Sega seem to be on the right path, we get Sonic 1 GBA, or the Advance and Rush team makes Sonic 4, or part of the team that put together Mania releases Sonic Origins. How am I asking about the physics in a collection of the original games? What is going on, Sega? So yeah, a long history in a series that's burned us a few too many times, but despite all of that, yeah, I can't help but love an underdog story, and Sonic is full of them. And Arzest is due a win. Balan or not, this is still Naoto Oshima. This is one of Sonic's daddies. Not to mention the returning T-Lopes and Jun Seotome for the soundtrack, and good golly, those two have crafted magic together in recent years. And they brought Metal Sonic's designer back to design more robots. Yes, I have my concerns, but I had to admit I was still excited all the same. And now, it's finally here, and as I already said up front, it's a good game. Just has some big red shoes to fill. But we first need to answer that question. Did Sonic Superstars nail the physics? And you ask most people, they're going to tell you yes. For me, I'll say yes with an asterisk. It's the best they've ever managed with 3D models in a Sonic side-scroller. The physics are not one-to-one with the classics, and to be fair, not every game should be the exact same thing every single time. Simply changing things to 3D models alone meant there were going to be some tweaks. Even if they'd somehow magically completely copied the original mechanics of the old games, this still looks different, and therefore your brain would tell you this feels different. And hell, Mania doesn't have the exact same physics as the original games, but it's close enough that I can't immediately tell. But with all that considered, I imagine even experienced fans will have the same thought I first did when picking up this game. Sonic and Pals feel a little heavy, and their air control is a little tighter than Mania and the like, and the spin dash is definitely nerfed. That aside, I don't think most people will really notice that much of a difference, and you do get a hang of it fairly quickly, because this game is designed around these physics and these mechanics, and everything feels intentional and thought out, leading to a good time for newcomers and veterans, for the most part anyway. Even with the life system removed, there are still frustrating elements that first-time players will be annoyed with, and I imagine we'll be hearing a lot of complaints about the back half of the game. Meanwhile, veteran fans are going to pick this up relatively quickly and probably have some fun with the more creative challenges as they pop up in later levels. But even speaking as one of those people, I did have some nitpicks from things old and new. So yes, I will be comparing it a bit to Sonic games that have come before this one. And I admit, some of these complaints are due to my own muscle memory and preferences, and yes, games should be judged on their own merits, but this is in a long-running series. Certain baseline expectations are always going to be there, and they must be considered, especially when the fan base can't confidently rely on the IP holder to consistently get the foundational stuff spot on after 30 years. Superstars doesn't exist in a vacuum, and unless you're brand new to the channel, Well, hi, how you doing? Please subscribe. Thank you so much. I'm gonna assume most of you aren't watching this video to get the opinion of someone inexperienced with Sonic games. That's what you got game journalists for.
I wasn't a fan of some changes, like Knuckles' glide having a recovery when it ends, extended if he lands on his stomach, but I digress.
I poke fun, but there are character-specific things that did stand out to me, and the echidna was the most disappointing of the bunch. Outside of the basic stuff I already mentioned, let's just get this out of the way. Sonic and Tails feel just fine to me. The flying might be a little bit different. I can't immediately notice it. The drop dash is back and is essential in some spots we'll talk about later. Does feel great. But Knuckles, yeah, he's another story. The build up to top speed is slower than Sonic's, which is nothing new, but it is a little bit more noticeable to me here. He feels overall slower and heavier, and his glide has a set speed, and he has this obnoxious slight pause when he does attach to a wall when you're trying to climb. And even when I did attach to a wall, a lot of the times I would immediately kick off of it. I don't know if it's because I'm holding the jump button down too long or something, but it is new and it is annoying. This might not seem like much, especially in first playthroughs when you are playing a little bit slower and more cautiously, but after a while and with a little bit more familiarity, these tiny little moments add up, especially if you're familiar with how he's played in the past. If I had to compare it to any previous iteration of Knuckles, I'd say it's closer to Chaotix than it is to Sonic 3K. Again, overall, it's fine. These are more differences than straight up errors. For me, it's a matter of, if it ain't broke, why did you try to fix it? And it's certainly far less offensive than what Frontiers did. How do you screw up open world Knuckles? Then we have Amy Rose, whose playstyle overall feels better than Knuckles for this game, and yet I have more to pick apart. Her mechanics are similar to what they established in Origins, but they still changed it, and so soon after making her debut such a big deal for that Plus expansion. Her hammer comes out with a jump, just a single jump, making her range of attack much wider than anyone else. And this time she also has a double jump, which comes in extremely handy, and is far more maneuverable in tight pinches than flying or gliding. She also does that hammer smash thing if you hold down the button as you hit the ground, but instead of dashing off, you have complete control over her movement. I already didn't understand why they didn't just evolve the 2D gameplay they made for her 20 years ago in Sonic Advance, and don't even get me started when it comes to her Frontiers playstyle. Yes, that's a 3D game with different mechanics and a structure that requires an entirely different moveset, and she is the fan favorite out of those new playable characters for Final Horizons. But even with the changes in Tails and Knuckles, the core ideas of their mechanics have stayed pretty consistent through their entire history. Amy has not. I know the Advance and Adventure stuff were not everyone's favorite, but I do think they had something special there. Amy went from the more technically minded hard mode to the little baby mode. Maybe they're trying to establish different movesets between the modern and classic designs, but that feels dumb. But again, this is more of a personal gripe than anything else. For what they've established here in this game, it feels good. You're definitely going to have people that far prefer this version of Amy than any other version that's come before. And I'm not trying to belittle anybody when I say easy mode. This game is fairly tough. I would highly recommend using her for a first time playthrough. I may miss my crap from Advance, but that Kirby hammer swing is satisfying and you can never go wrong with a double jump in a Sonic game. But yeah, overall, even if you notice some differences here or there in the weight or momentum of each character, if you know classic Sonic, you're gonna feel right at home with the running, drop dashing, flying, gliding, and climbing. If you've never played a classic game before Superstars, this game will show you the ropes, just as well as any of those old Genesis games. Tails, Knuckles, and Amy prove incredibly useful for exploring, obviously Tails especially. Once again, you can fly over a lot of challenges, and Sonic, of course, is the speediest, and that's no surprise, since his secondary ability has you literally speeding up across the ground and not over anything else. You're gonna have to properly master the level design instead of flying over everything. So yeah, it's exactly what you'd expect from a well-made classic Sonic game. There are 12 zones to explore that are connected with a simple hub, somewhat similar to Generations, but far less interactive, so I guess that's kind of like a middle ground between the console and 3DS versions of Generations. Whatever the case, I love me a good hub. But you can just skip this and just play level to level. Just know they are not created equally. Some zones have the basic 2-act structure, some Some have 1, another has 3, 4 of them have an extra character-specific zone. And we also get bonus mini-games that unlock with fruit, which can be found in levels or one at the end of acts. But these are a quick way to farm medals, which I'll talk about later. But again, not every bonus stage is created equal. Here you can collect rings and medals, and well, I mean, that's really it. You're collecting rings to get more medals. But as the game carries on, the fruit acts become harder to control or become far more punishing if you run into the border that's constantly chasing you. And every time you visit one of these stages, it costs you one of your fruits. So there's really no reason to revisit any other fruit stage after the first one. You don't have any unwieldy bumper bouncing, and you can collect more medals, which is the point of these stages. But let's get back to the levels made specifically for certain characters. I did like most of them fine, except for Amy's, which turned into an escort mission halfway through it. I don't know why they have your character collecting animal buddies. They did this here and in Final Horizons, and in both cases, it's awful. But that aside, it was nice to see some extra attention given to character-specific abilities in these levels. You can hop into them as they pop up during your journey, even if you're currently playing a different character. And they do provide a little bit of extra story, so they are worthwhile. This does also mean that you don't need to roll through this game 4 separate times with 4 separate characters. As long as you're on a single save file, all your characters share the same campaign progression and emeralds. I know that's going to bum out some fans, but I can see why they did that for this game, especially if one of my theories turns out to be true. I think it's possible they did the single campaign layout to make the inclusion of future DLC characters less of a headache if they are included down the road. And I kind of hope they do, because I really don't know why they went with the Superstars name otherwise. The roster isn't that expansive. But I think the main reason they went with a single campaign is to make sure all the emeralds could be shared between the characters, as they now include a new power with each gem. But before we get into those specific powers, let's quickly talk about how you obtain them. You have to track down a giant ring and conquer a special stage, which is nothing new for this franchise. And as for the special stage themselves, I don't think there's anything too special about them. You swing from spheres and use a homing attack. Well, I guess if this is the only place they're putting homing attack in classic Sonic games, I guess that'd be fine. Anyway, you collect rings to keep your timer going. You avoid mines, hit dash or jump pads when needed. It's fine. I've lost a couple times in the later stages, but never felt like much strategy was all that necessary. The emerald stays on a set path, I think, but it feels like no matter how fast I'm going, it's just always a little bit ahead of me. It feels very forced, and it also feels like one of the most mindless sets of special stages I've ever come across. There's nothing special to write home about. I'll save my web swinging for Spider-Man 2. They do spread out how frequently you can get an emerald though. Only 1 per zone. This guarantees that you can't cheese the game with a super mode on your first playthrough, and gives you a little bit more time to adjust to each new emerald power as you come across them. Doesn't mean there's only 1 giant ring per act though. Once you collect that initial emerald, every other giant ring in the stage will turn blue. This brings you back to the special stage, but instead of an emerald, you can now collect 5 medals. And if you come across a checkpoint with enough rings, you can hop into a portal that will lead you to a separate set of special stages. These ones inspired by Sonic 1's designs. Make your way through these and you'll be rewarded with medals. I've seen people complain about these stages and how they kill the pacing, but you don't actually have to play them if you don't want to. I like that they give you an extra reason to explore if you feel like it, even when we're playing the game. And I even like these stages. They're kind of like how Blue Sphere stages were set up for Mania. They're well designed, and you get far more maneuverability than the original Sonic 1 version ever gave you. So yeah, I think they're fine. They're inoffensive little distractions if you want to partake in them. Speaking of distractions, derailed a bit from the emerald powers, so let's finally get back to those. Some of the emerald powers have a heavier focus on combat, while others help out with exploration, and occasionally both intertwine, which means there are going to be some clear favorites and some obvious weak links. The most prominently promoted power was the Shadow Clone Jutsu, because Sonic just can't stop stealing from shonen anime. And while I love that, I don't love this power. It is great for picking up out of reach items, clearing out badniks, and comes in a pinch in some of the harder boss battles. But I do wish they did a little bit more to differentiate the clones from the character on the screen. I'd sometimes completely lose my place on the screen because I couldn't tell who I was controlling. If these clones were more of a solid color, or maybe they put this emerald power onto an emerald that didn't share a color with a main character, like yellow for instance, because none of the main cast is yellow. You also get a fire bullet, and we've seen iterations of this in older games, and for good reason. It's a good way to reach different areas and do some damage along the way. The water ability lets you turn into chaos and travel waterfalls or freely swim around without losing air, which is very useful in the one water zone in this game. Vision lets you see some invisible platforms and rings which can lead you to medals, special stage rings, or absolutely nothing. Again, they can help out in a pinch in some more tricky platforming sections, but there were spots where I didn't even see the point of them. And you also get slow. I don't know who was working on a Sonic game and thought slow was a good idea, but yeah, it does come in handy. There are some sinister traps and boss attacks in the back half of the game, and this will give you some much needed breathing room. Also, there's Ivy. It's the Mario vine. Pops up out of the ground and carries you in whatever direction you point it towards, but it's the Mario vine. Clearly they ran out of ideas and this sucks, and we also have Tails. Who needs this? The last emerald power is character specific. It says character specific, but they're all ranged attacks. Amy throws hammers, so bye-bye Hyper Amy, for real this time. Knuckles punches and it carries forward with a little energy blast. Tails kicks up a little tiny cyclone. I guess it's better than fake rings. And Sonic performs the homing attack. We just can't help ourselves, can we, Sega? If you've dabbled with the older games, or at the very least picked up the busted re-releases of Colors and the less busted Origins from the past couple years, you're going to immediately see how these powers compare to elemental shields and wisps. The difference is in how you can bust these babies out. You can use your emerald abilities at almost any time outside of specific spots in the game. You can access them with your right thumbstick and activate it with your leftmost letter or shape button depending on your console and controller of choice. I found this to be a little messy in more tense, fast-paced situations, but it's nothing you can't handle with a little practice. And you can also cycle through these abilities with the top bumpers, or flat out cancel certain powers when you hold down both bumpers. That includes the super form. That's the first time they've ever done that in any of these games. There's also designated spots in the level where the game will just tell you when to use certain abilities by throwing the icon up on the screen. When that happens, you can just smack the action button without even bothering to cycle through the powers, and you're good to go. Since selection and activation are two separate commands, you can queue up the power and activate it when you're ready, but if you are hit during this time, it will make you reselect the power, and if you're hit while using the emerald ability, the power is just canceled completely, and you won't be able to reuse it until you hit a checkpoint. I do sometimes prefer the original elemental shields when comparing it to this. I just had more fun with most of those abilities, felt like the right amount. Feel like 7 might be a little bit too much. Granted, as much as I've whined about the changes they've made for Amy over the years, a double jump always feels good, and I do appreciate that we have a character who just permanently has that ability, as opposed to losing it anytime you were hit by an enemy. Oh, and another quick tangent, they do have a magnet ability in one of the item monitors. It doesn't act as a shield, you will lose it and your rings if you're hit, but it does double up with the basic shield. So you grab the magnet ability, you grab a shield, and you'll still get rings heading your way. That's kind of cool. But yeah, back to the emerald abilities, I think you're going to see a lot of people complain about how forgettable they can be, and I'll be honest, I certainly forgot about them too for a good long while, and I was worried that we'd be in another Sonic Color situation where it never felt like the game fully committed to the gimmick, even though I don't always want my Sonic experience distracted by forced gimmicks. Again, look at Sonic 4 Episode 2. And honestly, pound for pound, I could take or leave these abilities. Same with the Wisps. But unlike Colors, the campaign doesn't require you to use the Emerald abilities. At least, not in your initial playthrough. We'll talk more about that later. But yeah, I do appreciate that they aren't required when you kick off your adventure, and honestly, that's probably where the forgettable critique will come into play. But the more you replay levels with more Emerald abilities, you will see roots and hidden treasures you may have missed out on. And that alone is why I feel they made the smart choice of making this a single campaign as opposed to splitting it off for each individual character. This method was also true for Sonic Colors, but I do feel like too much of the level design for that game boxed off quite literally on occasion for certain Wisp-themed puzzles. None of that is bad, but I do think the Emerald abilities merge a little bit cleaner with the overall flow of Superstars. For the most part, there are some pace-breaking problems we'll have to get into later, but as far as the powers are concerned, concerned, I appreciated some of them the more I played and replayed this game. Now, for the levels themselves, we finally have all original zones once again, a lot of which still follow the same basic templates of other Sonic games, which I am totally fine with. Sonic's World has a definitive look, and I appreciate them leaning into that while finally giving us some new assets. Also, I'm just a sucker for carnivals and spooky stuff, and they mixed both of them in a single act. They really haven't had this much fun with environments since, like, Shadow the Hedgehog? Yeah, the dark and moody game, go figure. There is a healthy amount of new ideas and remixed ones, and that's what we really needed out of a new 2D Sonic game. It's more than just giving us new environments and layouts. Sonic Advance did that, and it still felt more basic than almost any other Sonic game that came out prior to it. They needed to bring in brand new elements to justify a brand new title, and to let returning players know that there are still new ways to experience this tried and true formula. It's a careful balancing act, though. Sonic is not exactly unfamiliar with gimmicks, and unfortunately, sometimes those gimmicks completely halt and distract the core gameplay. That's not always a problem for platformers, but when the reward for good gameplay is speed and flow, throwing in anything that disrupts that can sometimes be a problem. Again, look at Sonic 4 Episodes 1, 2, and the console version of Colors. Now, I don't think that's always a bad thing if the game is designed around that and designed well. I think Colors is a perfectly solid game, and speaking of, some obvious elements have been lifted from that title and plopped in here outside of the Emerald abilities. And quite frankly, in almost every single case, it's done better here because those elements better match with classic physics compared to the more stiff block-style 2D nonsense of Colors side-scrolling. But also, make no mistake, there are going to be spots that derail the gameplay flow completely. Again, we will have to get into those examples as we come across them in the spoiler half of the video. For each of these 12 zones, they all have something unique going on to mix things up, like using a shuttle loop to rev up your characters and launch them into the air. Doesn't really do anything, but I guess it looked neat for a trailer. Or having a snake slide through an entire act. Some of these gimmicks are fine, some expand the core physics in fun ways, others are clearly here for multiplayer, but there's not too many of them, and again, we'll talk about it later. But I can't imagine every gimmick will make a return for future games. There are some stinkers here, but at the very least, the game feels polished enough and confident enough in the core Sonic basics to expand on well-trodden grounds in clever ways. And as the game carries on, these gimmicks grow more and more challenging and elaborate. Had some frustrations with my first time through, but rarely did it ever feel unfair, especially since they just remove game overs. You don't even get penalized by losing medals or anything like that. Checkpoints are abundant, and they even point you in the right direction, which helps with the more elaborate levels. But I'm still going to bet that Press Factory becomes the least favorite level for most players. Did you enjoy Wacky Workbench or Sandopolis Act 2? No? Well, good luck. The first act has the whole level bounce every few seconds. It's frustrating, especially in a later mode, but if you manage to go along with what this level is doing, you start to treat it like a rhythm game. So it's a shame that the music doesn't exactly match along with the beat. I feel like that was a missed opportunity, even in the, like, spoilers here, harder version of this level. It feels weird this wasn't considered here especially. Sonic games are at their best when you can master the flow state, and Press Factory demands you pay attention to the environment and the timing of the ever-present kick. I will talk more about level-specific mechanics in the spoiler section, but while I am on the subject of music specifically, the soundtrack is a surprisingly mixed bag. There are some standouts. While they don't immediately blow me out of the water, I do think they will endure the test of time and slot in nicely with some of the favorites of one of the most beloved video game music legacies out there. But there are other times the music feels subpar compared to other compositions within its own soundtrack. There are a lot of cooks in this musical kitchen, and you can hear it. That's not always a bad thing. Just look at Klonoa's soundtrack. That thing is beautiful, and it flows beautifully together. But with Superstars, you're going to draw a lot of comparisons to Sonic 4, because June, as great as he is with a guitar, cannot get past that Sonic 2 snare he loves so much. Some of his stuff is better than what he's produced for 4, but not by much. Some of it's forgettable, other times it's distracting boring or ill-fitting for the environment, and even if you don't find any of the tracks that offensive, it's hard to argue that there are glaring weak points here. I genuinely don't know why they did this. I don't know why they did that for Origins. I certainly don't understand why they did it for Superstars. And we know there are people on the staff that are extremely aware of the critique against Sonic 4's soundtrack. And yes, I know some of you are just fine with it, but stop. Have some standards, button up your damn shirt, comb your hair, sort it out. Because I promise you, if anyone feels like this stuff is substandard, I would guarantee it's Jun himself. He's too good not to know this stuff sucks. The man can make a killer melody, and he does that here, but for some reason hides it behind horrible instrumentation. Just to prove that point, listen to the original Splash Hill for a quick second. Now, you could love it or hate it or don't care, whatever, but listen to the remix dropped a few years ago, which features not only T-Loops, but also Jun himself on guitar and released through Sega's official social media. Listen to that energy, how it lets that melody explode out when it's not weighed down by a pathetic attempt to emulate the Genesis. I refuse to believe that anybody prefers the original over this remake. Even if they're trying to do a throwback gameplay style, Jun's tracks don't match with what's on display in Superstars. I mean, good God, this new Splash Hill? Play it behind Sonic 4. It legitimately makes it a better game. It's that good. Yes, I obviously understand that the remake for Splash Hill is far more elaborate, took a lot more time and effort to put together, but I don't care. They brought in T and Jun, and look at what they did for Team Sonic Racing, for crying out loud. Sega can pay these talented people for their time and talent to make sure this is done right. I have certain expectations when you tell me that Jun Seiyotame and T-Loops are working together on the same soundtrack. I know I'm harping on this point, but in recent years, Sonic has been slouching in spots he hasn't had trouble with before. We got over the polish problem and suddenly that's slipping again, even in game re-releases. And the soundtrack in a Sonic game should never be a problem, but it has been, and that needs to stop. Especially since, listening to T, he clearly has not lost his touch. Of course, I love Bridge Hill's theme. Gotta have a strong starting track. And Antu pointed this out to me and called out how Lagoon City Act 2 sounded like something straight out of Sonic CD, and I have to agree, and that's a good thing. Totally captured that vibe beautifully. Also, is it Lagoon City or Lagoon City? Or Lagooning City? Oh, and Gilly the Kid pointed out how Amy's levels sounded like the music you'd find in current Pokemon games, and he's not wrong. But moving off the music itself and more about the sound, I appreciate the idea behind some of the sound mixing. You get a lot more cues of upcoming traps and badniks if you're paying attention to the sound effects, as previously mentioned with Press Factory, but they also miss the mark in obnoxious ways in other spots. You have some enemies that make constant loud noises even well away from the player character, thinking of the bees in a later stage. And yes, Pup, I know you're editing the video. Go nuts with your stupid bees. And in other spots here and there, you'll hear it for yourself, trust me. There's a boss fight that is totally obnoxious with it. Oh, speaking of bosses, this game once again tries to quell the potential hit spamming you could do in the old games by keeping Eggy out of reach most of the time during fights, forcing the player to survive a gauntlet of attacks and platforming challenges while waiting for an opening to strike. Most of these are pretty clever and well thought out, but as you can imagine, this also comes at the cost of that ever-precious flow state. Some of these fights drag on way too long, and even if you don't have to worry about a game game over. This will test your patience if you lose a life, and this is consistent through the entire game, and also includes the mini boss fights. Now, some of the fights are quicker than others, and I appreciate they put the short fights behind some of the more grueling levels of the game. I do think that balances out a little bit better. They usually leave the longer fights for the end of the single act zones, but for these longer fights, it does get exhausting, even on repeat playthroughs. Hell, maybe even especially on repeat playthroughs. Even if you get the more frustrating challenges mastered, you still have to do a lot of waiting around, and it gets exhausting. And yeah, if you get killed, because there are certain insta-kill moments in these fights, you gotta start the whole thing over again. And there certainly were ways to mitigate this without completely spamming and breaking the battle. Maybe have some of these bosses take less hits. Maybe get rid of the mini-boss battles entirely. There are a lot of bosses. Cut down on some of them. Or cut down on some of these tedious animations. I don't need to see this crap every single time. I appreciate that they act as cues, but there are just so many little moments where you're not doing anything and it gets old. All that said, while they aren't perfect, I don't know if I'd call any of them truly unfair. And I do think they subtly teach you things to prep you for the big end game battles, which I did enjoy for the most part. And slight spoilers here. Obviously, I love the idea behind the Cyber Station boss fight, incorporating the prototype bots that reflect what you've customized in multiplayer. But the constant movement is extremely frustrating at first. I mean, I'm glad they didn't give up on the idea of a Sonic running battle. It is still a cool concept, but when the build up to your momentum is as slow as it is here, it doesn't mesh super well. I really feel like the only character that thrives in this particular fight is Sonic himself, as you can use the drop dash, getting flashbacks to all those frustrating battles in Sonic Advance 2. I think this is where the boost games actually shine. Their running boss battles fit that playstyle perfectly. Not so much here. Still, this was a lovely callback to previous Metal Sonic encounters, so I can't be that mad. But speaking of robots, let's talk about multiplayer. Yeah, it's not great. Don't get me wrong, you can find yourself in a silly, chaotic time with the right people, and this is the best two-player experience a series has ever created, but it's still not great, which sucks. I feel like this was a major selling point for the game. This is a reason why some people will pick up Superstars, but it falls short in the same way it always falls short. Camera priority. I was going to be potentially upset about the lack of online campaign play, since this is only local co-op for the stories, but I gotta be honest, they still haven't figured out the core problem that was always here since they introduced the two-tailed fox. Then for special stages, you gotta take turns, and it's whatever. I guess you can attempt to coordinate. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not trying to defend this, not really. This is dumb. It's not well thought out. I already didn't like the special stages all that much, and making them turn-based didn't help. Doesn't mean you can't have a silly time with your friends, but make no mistake, this game was not optimized for multiplayer, and I don't know if that's a blessing in disguise, because for my personal preferences, I prefer a single-player Sonic experience, and for the most part, it's totally fine when playing by yourself. And if they designed these zones with more multiplayer in mind, I don't know if we would have gotten a Kirby Star Ally situation, or maybe Knuckles Chaotix again, where the environments are a little bit more boring, just to make sure a multiplayer Sonic situation worked just fine, and they kept the camera pulled back enough so there's space for everyone to move around. I don't know. Maybe they could have committed to a split-screen co-op situation. Whatever the case is, they haven't cracked the multiplayer code yet, at least for the campaign. I did have higher hopes for the battle mode, partially because it's the focus of the only other major collectible outside of the emeralds themselves, the medals. Like Sonic Colors, you don't actually play any of the core characters in battle mode, but instead, robot doubles or just robots you cobble together yourself. I think I commented on this back when I covered Colors, and I'm really happy they took the idea in the right direction this time. I was so confused why they went with a boring Sonic clone when Metal Sonic was right there. Here in Superstars, not only do they feature a playable Metal Sonic, but you can also dress him up however you like. And they also have Metal Knuckles, and they designed a Metal Tails and a Metal Amy, along with clowns and pumpkins and the like. And you can mix and match all of this as you see fit. You can even color different body parts. I gotta tell you, I really love using the robots in this fashion. This is genius. Not only did they bring back my beautiful baby boy Metal Knuckles, they brought in new versions of Metal characters designed by the guy who originally created Metal Sonic. This is an absolute dream come true for me. This is the right kind of nostalgia. Taking more obscure stuff and letting it shine in a unique way. I got Metal Knuckles playable in a side-scrolling Sonic game. That's all I've ever wanted. They also took the metal copy idea to its obvious conclusion by finally giving the rest of the cast their own robo-doubles, and quite frankly, I think they all look great. And yes, you canon nerds, this just makes me want a classic Shadow that much more. He could have finally had a metal copy, but no, can't have too much fun in your super serious timeline. Why do you guys hate fun? You nerds are so boring. You're so boring. And so is battle mode. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a big bummer. The concept is cool, don't get me wrong. You have mini games where you race or shoot each other or try to stay on the platform as long as possible. Stuff like that. It's all simple, very Fall Guys, and all randomized. It's extremely bare bones though. You can't pick any of the mini games you want to do, nothing like that. If this game gets DLC updates or a secondary re-release like Mania Origins, and it likely will, they'll likely call it Plus again, but if I were Sega, I would go ahead and make Sonic Superstars Battle, because they really need to emphasize a proper multiplayer update. Yes, the campaign has some bugs that do need to be patched out. Don't like that they're here, but again, it's nowhere near as bad as some people are making it out to be, and certainly better than other recent Sonic releases. But multiplayer really needs to be fleshed out with more modes and more customization. I'm not a big multiplayer guy myself, but this is one idea Sega will just not let go of when it comes to Sonic, and honestly, they are not that far off from making something really special, but they need to put in a bit more effort. Bring in more characters. Mega Sonic Mark II needs a skin. Mark I is already here. Hell, let the medals be unlockable skins for the single player while I'm thinking about it. I'd be very surprised if they don't do that. They let you use skins, and yes, I'm aware that the Lego skins are here, and technically you can kind of play the modern version of characters in this game if you care. There's just a lot more they can do, and yeah, I think this portion of the game is where they need to expand. But it is kind of a bummer it wasn't here to begin with, because the way you go about unlocking these robot parts is pretty blatantly padded out to an embarrassing degree. Like I mentioned earlier, the actual things you collect in the core game are fairly limited. There are skins, but they're locked behind pre-orders, digital deluxe versions, they're DLC basically. The robot doubles and spray can colors are unlocked after you beat certain character levels or campaigns, and by unlocked, I mean you are now allowed to buy them from the shop, and you can only do that by collecting medals. You can do that in all the different special and bonus stage stuff I already talked about, and where you could potentially use them for more skins or music tracks or any of the silly stuff they had you use them for in Origins. Here, you can only use them to buy robot parts for multiplayer. That's it. Where Origins was far too generous with its coins, Superstars is far too stingy with its medals, and the way they utilize it in this game feels kind of gross. Say, for example, you want to build Metal Knuckles. You can't just buy the bot and be done with it. No. First, you need to buy a prototype. That's just a base robot. From there, you now have to buy individual parts: the head, arms, torso, and legs. But all of these parts do not come at the standard default color of these iconic robots. They're instead a base silver color. Now, Knuckles looks great like this, and if that's your color of choice, then good for you. But if you wanted to be on model, you need to buy a red spray can. No, sorry, I mean 4 red spray cans, because you can only use them one single time, and they only cover one body part each. You can buy more prototypes, which means you can build up a ready-to-use roster real quick, but as many robot doubles as they have, you only have 5 spots to use, so use them wisely. But before any of that, you need to get the funds first, and every single part is expensive. One paint can is 10 medals. That is 2 special stages worth of medals. It might not sound like much, but trust me, this adds up, and the farming gets old very quickly. My first playthrough of Superstars got me enough to buy Metal Knuckles. Not get every single color, but enough to buy him at least. Now, I understand the purpose here. Seeing as you get medals through battle mode, this incentivizes replayability in multiplayer, and again, even in the main game. That makes sense to me. But I do feel the inventory is extremely limited, and this keeps players away from really playing around with the customization far longer than it really should, which is especially problematic because the multiplayer just isn't that interesting. You can get more medals if you win online battles, but after the first day, I rarely have ran into anybody else in online unless I'm actively trying to get people together to play a round or two. This is a massive shame. I love these bots, and this really should have been the game changer, the element that makes Superstars stand out from every other Sonic game, but it just isn't. It's undercooked in every way, and with the tedium of medal collecting, it's a little insulting. Now, with all of this said, I can understand if you feel I'm being incredibly negative on this game, and I am very harsh on it in spots. This is a downgrade in a lot of areas when compared to a game that came out 6 years ago, a game that had way too many old stages, touched up as they were. But make no mistake, I still had a very good time with Superstars, and before I go any deeper with any details, good or bad, there are some things I need to gush about that requires I go full spoilers. So, this is your last warning. Okay, now as I said before, let me say it again with proper enthusiasm. Metal Knuckles is back! And they got Metal Amy, and they got Metal Tails, and you can play Metal Sonic. Are you kidding me? That's incredible! That's enough for me to make a purchase. Are you kidding? How can I ever be mad at this game? Metal Knuckles is here! They even brought back the Egg Robos, and the Tails doll makes a cameo! The entire Sonic R cast is in a side-scrolling classic Sonic game, and that is insane to me. I have wanted that since 1997. I know it's nostalgia baiting, but it's working on me, baby. I'm so damn happy. They look so beautiful. I even love the new robot designs. I love that item capsule head. I love the pumpkin. I love the clown. I'm nuts for Sonic bots, and this game is a dream come true in that aspect. And speaking of dreams, we even have a Metal Knights. I'm sorry, but this little robot here feels like Arzest's redemption. I didn't know if they'd ever touch anything even remotely resembling Balan Wonderworld again. Hell, I never thought they'd do anything that ever had Yuji Naka involved. But they made a full-ass Sonic game, and there's even a Metal Knights, the character most compared to Balan. This has got to be a middle finger to Yuji. This has to be Naoto reclaiming this character, because he did design this character. And it continues the long-standing tradition of featuring Knights in a Sonic game, because they certainly won't be making more Knights games. Please make more Knights games, Sega. But even the old characters considered and brought in and celebrated and robot copies of them, I also can't overlook the new character, one created by Naoto Oshima himself alongside Takashi Iizuka. This game introduces us to Trip the Sun Gazer, who, alongside the finally returning Fang, helps Eggman out with finding a dragon? I know I said this was the spoiler section, but this game isn't exactly strong in the storytelling department. It's trying to pull a Sonic 3 Knuckles, but even in comparison to that, this is painfully vague. There are some things we could drop from the Genesis era, my dudes. This is one of them. They could have fleshed things out a bit, and we'll try to a different time, but for right now, we have Trip here who's covered in a bucket, never really feeling like a bad guy, or like she's forced to help the bad guys, and sure enough, as the game carries on, she finally pops off her helmet to reveal, well, she doesn't exactly look like a lizard, but I don't care. I love her. I love her design. Also, she's a dragon. Yeah, we'll talk about that in her own video. But just to keep it on Superstars and its gameplay, Trip does become the 5th playable character, filling in that obvious empty slot on the title screen. And finally, Sonic once again introduces us with a new character with a new mechanic in mind. And by new mechanic, I mean an old one, because Trip obviously has the Spike Wisp ability from Sonic Colors, and I gotta tell you, I love it. As I told you earlier on in this video, I do think Colors was perfectly fine on its own, but there are some elements that I felt were undercooked or not properly utilized. One of those major components was the Spike Wisp, which allowed you to ball up and roll up walls and along ceilings for a very limited time, and often in spots with sharp angles, i.e. boxes, so it didn't always feel that great. As I said before, there are a lot of little things that remind me of Colors here in Superstars. Emerald abilities aside, oh, and speaking of Emerald abilities, Trip's unique ability is a fireball. No, but you guys are right, there's certainly no comparisons to be made with Mario. And there's this random-ass drill section in Golden Capital. I really have no idea why it's here. It requires no skill, but easily the most prominent Colors comparison comes in Trip's wall gripping ability, which not only makes sense for her Sun Gazer species. Really love they brought back that donut look from Classic Vector. This was a great choice for a Sonic character, but this is showing me that they're finally utilizing the right ideas from games like Sonic Colors and took a mechanic that can be far better utilized in a game built around the classic formula. Does this kind of downplay Knuckles and Amy? I mean, I guess. Trip also does have a double jump like Amy and is far more maneuverable on walls when compared to Knuckles, but they are different enough that I personally don't mind, and they do design her campaign well enough around these abilities and the Emerald powers, which, yes, she does get her own unique campaign once you beat the vanilla story mode. I will mention some differences here and there as we summarize levels and boss battles where they really deviate in design or function, but for the most part, just consider it similar to the Knuckles campaign from Sonic 3K. Platforming challenges are designed around her unique abilities, and the game is just harder in general, and they do expect you to have Emerald abilities at a certain point. You cannot get past Pinball Carnival without at least 5 Chaos Emeralds in your inventory. But yeah, first part of the game is relatively inoffensive. Bridge Island is a strong starting level. Got some similar vibes to other opening hill and beach levels, with a giant mecha mosasaur splashing around in the background, confirming the devs have seen Jurassic World and have played Sonic Fan Remix. Not sure if they were trying to flex on an ancient fan game. I suppose that could be seen as a wild stretch, but looking at this entire package after Mania, this game does give me some very heavy, we could do it too vibes. It could just be a loving reference, or maybe they just really like Jurassic Park. I certainly do, so I'm not upset about seeing a giant robot Mosasaurus. I do wish it survived just a little bit longer. Would have been cool to see this as a boss fight, but you know what, actually, never mind. Now that I'm thinking about it, let me heap a little bit of praise on the Mosasaurus for being the only mini boss that doesn't overstay its welcome. It's more of a set piece than anything else, and I kind of wish more of the mini bosses were handled like this. The rest never get as large or as badass in design, and they all last way longer than anyone cares for. They could have done more chases or things of that nature. Think of the Titans from Sonic Frontiers. There were some clever ways to implement them as opposed to a tedious boss battle. So yeah, shout out to the Mosasaurus. Certainly underutilized for how heavy we saw it in the marketing, but leaves the party before anybody feels it stayed too long. Please make a toy of this, Sega. I want to buy it. Speed Jungle is up next, where you spend most of your time rail grinding, which I'm good and fed up with in Sonic games nowadays, but they implement it in fun ways here, and it only lasts for this zone, and it's certainly far more welcome than the lights out segments in the second act. One of the biggest complaints you'll hear about any classic style Sonic game is screen crunch, and this game certainly could have used a camera that was pulled back a little ways, which we know they can do thanks to the multiplayer mode. So I don't understand why they dedicated an entire segment to limiting your field of view. It's not fun, it just sucks. Also feels antithetical to the very idea of a speed jungle, and the bosses here are fine. The mini boss is almost a little more elaborate than the Eggman battle. They're okay, but yeah, they're here for a bit too long. At least Eggman begins to train you on the importance of red and blue projectiles. I was gonna say I don't know why these boss battles don't actually take advantage of a level named Speed Jungle. That's where Fang comes in, who's really stepping up his game this time around. He's always been something of a joke character, but his boss encounters certainly aren't, as you need to rail grind vines as you maneuver around missiles and lasers and the like. This is a strong return for an obscure character. I'm glad they finally gave the boys some chance to shine. Now, if they could do something about those cursed snork tube ears, I'd be just the happiest boy. We'll talk about Fang as he shows back up. He is easily the most challenging boss character you will come across, tougher even than Eggman. Up next is Sky Temple, and it threw me off because I expected this zone to show up much later thanks to Sky Sanctuary training me to think that way. For the zone itself, there's not much to say here. It's pretty enough. The floating gimmicks can sometimes be frustrating considering how it often leaves your character uncurled and open to attack, but for a level in the sky, I didn't find bottomless pits to be a constant problem. Glad they're moving away from that here and there, but yeah, bottomless pits are still in this game. I also appreciate them kind of showing why this part of the North Star Island is floating in the sky to begin with. There's no Master Emerald or anything like that. I think these floating bits here are thanks to the windy contraptions, and also because this section gets caught up in a storm on the back half of the level, which definitely will draw comparisons to Windy Valley. And since it is a single act zone, the boss fight here is a lot more elaborate than anything we have faced up to this point. And yeah, it does kind of drag out, especially for Trip's campaign. I had a lot of trouble here with the lizard. You have to carefully dodge airborne saw attacks that multiply as the egg robo releases them. Then you got to move up platforms, dodge more attacks, and then carefully land back on floating pieces of debris before you can jump at the boss. It's clever in design, really is, but good god, this does drag, and this really is the biggest problem in these fights. The airborne movement is so damn slow, which is especially frustrating considering the amount of projectiles you have to dodge while you're up in the air, and unfortunately this becomes a problem later on in the game as well. But for now, let's move on to Pinball Carnival, and I'll be real, when I first saw this zone in screenshots, I was a little let down with how bland the overall art direction felt to me. I was hoping it'd be a tad more vibrant, but after playing through it, I do enjoy the roulette wheel, the classic pinball and roller coaster style gimmicks. But to a point, the roller coasters do become a little bit of a headache. And as I said earlier on in this video, I do adore Halloween gimmicks as well. So when they added that into the second act of the zone, I was just happy as can be. I really love how this level looks and plays. And I'm so happy that this is where the Tails doll made its cameo, completely cementing the creep factor of this character. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to play the doll elsewhere, but I'm just fine with it being a cameo. This is the perfect spot and the perfect amount of Tails doll. Now that I think about it, I appreciate the little Easter eggs here and there in Superstars, especially when compared to Frontiers. That was a big open world game and they didn't have any proper unique Easter eggs to spot in the environment. That's part of the fun of exploring, and Superstars did it just right with the doll. Oh, and it does also serve as the gold badnik for this act. Forgot to mention that earlier, but there are gold badniks, one for each act of the game, and you get a medal and a little stamp on the level select if you can find it and beat the act without dying. Just a fun little extra something to get you to explore the levels. I love silly stuff like this. Just a fun little addition. But back to the level itself, I do wish the boss was a little bit more bombastic. I mean, this is a big carnival. You got a haunted thing going on in the second half. They could have gone really creative with whatever you're going to be going up against. But after the roller coaster nonsense, the Eggman fight is a little bit of a relief, using the roulette wheels introduced in this act in clever ways. It's overall inoffensive. And the clown mini boss, while it is a bit drawn out, is also fairly clever, requiring you to navigate the mini areas to hit targets to expose a weak spot for said clown. And all that aside, I gotta say, Pinball Carnival Act 2 changed my mind. This is top tier art direction for me, and it's giving me heavy Klonoa 2 vibes. And I'm getting heavy Klonoa Wii vibes for Lagoon City, which both me and my buddy Channel Pup immediately took notice to. But I already made my joke about Lagoon City. It's a water level. It's very tolerable, and especially with the Emerald ability. The boss fight is also clearly designed for that same power, so just a heads up, it's fairly frustrating otherwise, but overall, it's whatever, or water ever, right? God, I'm old. Sand Sanctuary is next, and while I don't think it'll offend most people, it's a pretty straightforward level with a pretty basic desert design. It sure has a lot of Orbinauts that get old real quick. They respawn their spike balls, and I never really appreciated how in earlier games, those balls would stay stationary, or once launched would be gone forever. Here in Superstars, they come right back, and my goodness golly, they are annoying. And these arrow line things just always throw me off. Feels like they don't react if you jump off near the end of them. They don't allow for any secondary jump abilities, and the momentum just doesn't match with the speed of these things. Feels like I should be able to launch straight forward, but nah, all I get is a piddly little jump straight up. Little things to nitpick, I know, but there were a couple of sections where you gotta deal with all of this crap at once. It's not too challenging, just annoying. Also wish the snake did more than just bounce you around this level. I was expecting a big boss fight, but nope, it's mostly just a quick reference to old Sonic art. And man, this dude looks so different compared to the snake from Sonic Forces. Then again, Vector and a big ass Croc are both in Heroes, and Espio and Trip are both lizards. Why even bother looking for consistency with these animals? It's never been that way. The boss fight is pretty easy, and once again utilizes that red and blue business, but man, it does take a while. I'm thankful this zone is only an act long, didn't feel like spending any more time than I already have. Unfortunately, Press Factory is up next, and I think this is the main culprit to blame when fans say that the second half of this game falls off. The tricks and traps grow more and more frustrating as this level carries on. I already told you everything I have to say about that first act, well, everything outside of the monkey mini boss. I just gotta be honest, it's fine, a totally normal boss fight. Granted, those pistons will insta-kill you if you're crushed, but they're telegraphed easy enough. I've never died to them. It's very similar to the final boss of Sonic 1 in that way, but I just had no patience for the stupid monkey by the time I got to this encounter. The act beforehand is way too long, and if you're off your groove, that silly hop gimmick will make your experience very repetitive and very tedious, and things only get worse with Act 2. Look, I've played Apologist for Sandopolis Act 2, and quite frankly, this level only made me appreciate those angry Batman ghosts even more because they learned all the wrong lessons here. You have this Eggman drone hovering in the background. Missed merch opportunity there, by the way. They just released a Sonic drone. They should have designed that to look like the Egg drone in Superstar so I could buy it and then smash it with a baseball bat. Anyway, this drone has an indicator that goes from green to red, and you do not want that to reach red. Like Sandopolis, you need to get to a switch to reset a countdown because otherwise it will instantly kill you if it reaches full capacity, and the switches aren't that abundant. Sometimes they're obnoxiously out of reach or blend in with the background. It sucks and it's not fun. I can see the thrill of chasing down the clock, and I feel like this is one of those instances that RZest felt they could get away with this since we no longer have game overs, but it's obnoxious all the same. It's a garbage zone. But like I said before, the boss fight is mercifully short, so it's balanced out in that way at least. But next up is a zone that just had me grinning ear to ear, up until the boss fight, more on that soon. This is Golden Capital, and my goodness was I immediately taken in by the black and white checkerboard laced ground with gold all over the place, and the Sonic geek in me just freaked out. This is the Sonic 1 concept art. I know I've said that Tropical Resort from Sonic Colors gave me the same vibes from that same concept art, and I still stand by that, by the way. There's a lot of little references in Colors level design, but mostly in vibes, alright? It's not one for one. But here, there's no mistaking it. This is ripped straight from an old doodle, and I could not be happier. I'm sorry, I know many people feel this zone is a bit redundant with all the casino business, but it's just so cool seeing this in-game. And that reminds me, they also brought in Feels the Rabbit, who they just call Rabbit, and we also get a Mecha Rabbit. On top of that, they brought Splats back. I know that Mania revitalized it, but it's still cool to see it again. Lots of rabbit love in this game. But where are the turtles? Oh my god, they even have a little gold turtle that you could ride on. And we'll get to it. Again, this is how you do nostalgia. This is how you celebrate the history of Sonic, by giving these old ideas a chance to live, reaching even further back than Green Hill Zone to do something truly special. And I don't even mind the pinball elements of the zone. I also like the lava bits that come in a little bit later. Almost feels like Lava Reef in reverse. The Capital really is one of the most creative levels in terms of art direction and layout, and I love how you get showered in golden rings. Feels lavish and royal, and all the colors between the two acts are just stunning. Just a shame that the music ruins it. Thanks, June. And yeah, again, those horrible, horrible bees. I swear I can hear these things throughout the entire level. Knuckles gets his own level here, and well, doesn't always utilize his abilities all that well, but it's mostly just fine. We do get a little bit more story and a look at a mural, which I do want to further examine another time. And leading into Act 2, they actually steal away your Chaos Emeralds, so this is the one act where you can't take advantage of your Emerald abilities. And then there are the bosses, and I know people have had issues with that pig, but I kind of thought it was clever. I like looping around the entire arena. Once again, kind of similar to the circular arenas from a couple of the boss fights in Sonic Colors, but here I like it a little bit better. I never had too much challenge with the pig. It steals all your rings at the beginning of the fight, but if you are having trouble, just pick Amy, or I guess Trip, anybody who can double jump and just hit the pig as it runs across the ceiling. I don't know, could just be me. I thought this piggy bank was kind of cute and thought it was fine. What is bad is the horrible pig that pops out of the pig. And now that I think about it, this might be the only mini boss that actually looks like the animal trapped inside. And that animal is far more terrifying than the robot thanks to these disgusting human hands. Just looks like a big naked dude. Give him hooves or gloves or something. Just anything outside of those little piggly digits. Gross. But outside of that, we also have another battle with Fang, and boy, it is a chore. Don't get me wrong, I love the idea behind it. The attacks are creative. I love the story they're telling through the battle as we watch Fang upgrade his ride, but man, the fire and lava hazards really come out of nowhere, and I never feel like I can react fast enough, which feels crazy since I feel like I also should have enough screen space to see what's about to happen. But we once again have the same speed buildup you'd find on normal ground, but on these hovering platforms, this just doesn't mesh well at all. You don't have enough reaction time unless you're hopping all over the place. And yes, I know this is yet another callback to running around on the tornado during Sky Chase, but it felt weird there, and I'm so tired of them bringing this crap back. But then again, Sky Chase did give us the Turtleoids, the best badnik ever, and Golden Capital brings us a golden turtle that we actually get to ride on, so never mind, I guess it's the best level ever. Jokes aside, the big problem with levels, and specifically boss fights like this, is the fact that you're going at the level's pace, not Sonic's. That ultimately is going to be the biggest problem people have with all of these boss battles in the game. And it's at its most frustrating here in in this Fang fight, requiring you to awkwardly maneuver around on a floating platform while dodging around hazards that feel kinda cheap, and if you die, and you're probably gonna die a few times, you gotta start this tired process all over again. At the very least, with a lot of other boss fights, as you begin to master them, they roll through much faster. But here in a fight like this, it will always take like 5 minutes before you're allowed to move on with the rest of the game. And it's extra frustrating if you're trying to go for all the gold badniks since you're not allowed to die during this fight. Still, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of clever stuff happening here, and it's not completely unfair or busted. Just messes with the flow more than anything else. But again, gotta appreciate how intimidating this little Jerboa turned out to be thanks to this game. Especially with that tease for a giant mech that immediately gets wrecked by Trip, who turns into a golden toothless. Yes, we will have some things to say about that in her own video. Just look, I'm sorry. I know this fight is frustrating, but ultimately, I still love Golden Capital. I can't help it. I also can't help but love Cyber Station. Once again, giving me Shadow the Hedgehog vibes. I'm glad we're seeing these themes from that game put into a decently plain game. Didn't think I would have any appreciation for the word cyber after Frontiers, but in this Tron-ass nonsense, it works for me. And the voxel forms for the characters are also cute. Granted, they look more like those Sonic nanoblocks than a representation of the original classic sprites. Do feel like that's a little bit of a missed opportunity there, but I like them all the same, and I like that they use the original art for the item monitors here as well. The music also feels like it's paying tribute to an era that existed before the Genesis games, but it sounds just fine because it's not done by June, so clearly they could do retro-style game synth without it sounding horrible. So why did they let June do that so often in this soundtrack? The level has you turn into a jellyfish and a little mouse. I know, right? Finally, that's all I've wanted from these games. And for the most part, it's a fun time. The little cat maze area is a bit obnoxious, but outside of that, I think this level's a winner. But this boss fight tears me in two. I love seeing the prototypes, or if you're a diligent metal collector, the different mechas you've put together. Finally gave me a Knuckles versus Metal Knuckles battle. Good call on this one, Scurvy Pirate Hog. But I also feel this fight is a complete pain in the ass if you're trying to do it without Emerald abilities or without Sonic's drop dash. But this fight also gives you a chance to replicate the giant red metal Sonic battle from Chaotix if you want. I mean, if you're fine with wasting metals on different colored paints and stuff like that, I sure as hell didn't. I have so many other things I got to unlock, but someday I'll definitely try that out one time, maybe. Frozen Base is the second to last zone. It's relatively inoffensive, tries to recapture the magic that was launching the Death Egg, which is kind of cute, and I actually like how they incorporated the launch with platforming challenges as the ground begins to crumble and move while the base takes off. The rest of the level largely consists of assembly lines that move forward or backward depending on their color, which you can switch with a switch. It's fine, it's pretty easy. I love all the background details like the busted badniks and a Yeti, confirming that cryptids exist in Sonic's universe. Play with that idea, Sega. Also love the little snowmen. Who's making those snowmen? Is Eggman making those snowmen? Oh, I love that. And the pterodactyl mini boss fight is actually kind of fun, at least for the main story. Kind of sucks when you're playing Trip, but you can cheese that if you feel like it. In fact, you can break a lot of Trip's campaign if you've collected all of the emeralds. And like I said before, you actually need to have at least 5 emeralds if you want to get past the 4th zone. So you're likely going to have all of the emeralds by the time you get to Trip's campaign. And yeah, I do think it's a little genius that Trip's story is designed with the new emerald powers and her abilities in mind, but what's less genius is the likelihood that you already have all 7 emeralds, because her super form breaks the game. And I just need to say it now, the super forms are just trash here. Yeah, Supersonic's here, great, duh. But every other character outside of Trip gets shafted. They barely glow anymore. It honestly looks like they just got stink lines. So yeah, I'm not happy about it.
But actually it makes Sonic more special because if everyone's super, then nobody is.
Yes, thank you, Syndrome. You can spare me the comment. You're on the wrong channel if you didn't think I would whine about super forms. But Trip, yeah, Trip's got a dragon mode, and that is awesome. But again, it's the most busted of the super forms. You can fly over everything. So there goes almost all of the challenge that you implemented in this secondary campaign. Good job, guys. And hey, look, I understand you could just not use it. And if you do end up using it during some of these miserable boss fights, I get it. And it's not always easy to collect the required 50 rings, so some form of challenge still exists, I guess. Just feel like this was a little bit of an oversight, because it doesn't feel like they designed the game around this new busted dragon form, and they could have potentially left the limited flight off the table at the very least. But hey, do with that what you will. Back to Frozen Base. I originally almost completely missed the first act. It was only thanks to Ant Dude pointing out to me that unlike any other level in the game, you start the zone by choosing between the first act or the Tails act. Every other character level allows you to play the other two acts, but here you can bypass Act 1 entirely. The Tails level is fine. There's a lot more space to take advantage of his flight, and it ends with the fox finding a bunch of abandoned eggmobiles, which your character of choice will hop into at the start of the second act. And depending on who you are playing, you will get a different eggmobile, each matching the design found in their debut game. So Sonic gets the eggmobile from Sonic 1, Tails gets the one from Sonic 2, Knuckles from Sonic 3, and even Trip gets a unique eggmobile, the Egg Scorcher Mark III, which was the first boss from Sonic 3. It's an awesome touch. I love seeing the Scorcher again. That was a very iconic design. I'm glad it's still being used today. You can then fly your chosen ride through a callback to a Sega classic. Just as Mania made a loving callback to Puyo Puyo, here we get a full act of Fantasy Zone, which you may feel has no connection to Sonic. At least Puyo Puyo had a Mean Bean reference just by being there. But using Fantasy Zone is actually a deep cut within itself, as one of Fang's early concept designs was inspired by Opa Opa, the little ship you control in Fantasy Zone. And with all these other deep cut callbacks, I have to feel this was an intentional choice for that reason. They clearly did a lot of research into the history of the series with this game, and I'm incredibly thankful for it. But yeah, the act's just fine. It's Fantasy Zone, so yeah, that's good. The final level is Egg Fortress. Yes, I know the end is in the background. Yes, I know there's also a blue planet. This just tells me that Sonic's homeworld isn't Earth. We don't have any of that crap floating around us, or floating islands, or little planets that come into orbit. I know they're never going to call it Mobius. I'm just never going to stop complaining about it either. More importantly, this level really isn't all that bad in terms of challenge. You gotta knock loose some lasers, outrun falling platforms, avoid other lasers as you float around in 0G, and to those brave enough or get too impatient with the floating, you can kick off the sides of the walls if you're feeling a little risky. The first act ends with Robotnik activating a time machine, I suppose. My buddy Pup pointed out how this felt like it came out of nowhere, and I didn't feel that way at first, mostly because they never bothered telling us where the emerald powers came from. But then again, none of the emeralds flat out reverse time. The most they do is slow down time. And now that I think about it, what happened to the time stones? Shouldn't they be the gems that mess with time? That would have been a great callback. Should have used them here. There's honestly a lot of stuff they don't ever properly explain in this game that could have potentially had an interesting impact on the overall lore. But I promise I'll continue to do my research. We'll have more to say in other videos, but for now, like the emerald powers themselves, the time machine thing is just something that happens, and it leads to one of the most ingenious levels I've seen in a Sonic game, and maybe the only time I've appreciated recycled levels and mirror modes, as you have to go back through the exact same level but now in reverse with everything else running in reverse. That does make some challenges a total joke, but it turns others into brand new threats that require you to rethink how you tackle them. They even paid attention to what rings you collected, as the ones that disappeared during your initial run will start to form back. It just made me appreciate the design of the level back to front. They had to make this work both ways, and I think it does. I really like this level. But when it comes to the boss fights that follow, well, I didn't like them at first, but after everything else in this game, I gotta say they provided a healthy challenge. In the main story, you of course have to fight Robotnik, but now in this Egg Samurai robot. It took me a little longer than I care to admit to figure out the first phase of the fight, and I've died a handful of times with each new attack phase, be it with him smashing platforms or launching another platform into the air before I realized I needed to quickly move. But overall, the biggest hurdle to overcome is memorization. It's very old school in that sense. And as tedious as some of the earlier fights could get, if you go in with a bit of patience and be ready to die a few times as you get a handle on the different patterns, you got this. Honestly, this is one of the most solid final fights in any of the classic styled Sonic games. It's tough, but it's fair. But when you get to Trip's ending, holy hell, Fang has not only stepped up and challenged, he also gets a Mecha Fang. Like a literal mecha. Fang has a goddamn Gundam that he controls himself, and it's a harder battle than what Eggman could dish out. With insta-kill attacks in both the first and second phases of the battle, it took me a real long time to get these patterns down. It is a toughie, but again, kind of feel like this is the only spot in the game where more demanding battles are a little more justified. And looking back at the other fights, I do appreciate how they train you on how to handle some of these attacks, and this is fairly consistent with how boss battles have been handled throughout the entire game. Love them or hate them, I do feel the fights are far more balanced and thought through than what we got with that insane spike in difficulty when we compare it to Frontier's third update. I know that feels like a pointless comparison, these are two very different games, but I am going to be pointing to this fight when I talk about Frontiers in a dedicated video, so I'm more just future-proofing myself in case there's any defensive fans that end up calling me a hypocrite. But all that said, I completely understand if this fight wasn't your cup of tea. These endgame battles aren't perfect. Like I've said countless times before, you're going at the boss's pace, not your own, and they do drag on, and the insta-kill attacks are always frustrating, especially when you don't know they're coming. But also, it's a big mecha fang. That's awesome. My frustrations aside, I think I like this battle far more than I don't. I can't say the same for the true final boss, because once you beat Trip's story, you unlock the last story, and if you're hoping for a little more context to the narrative, sorry to tell you, it doesn't really happen. That dark egg gem you saw in the hub world, that was very obviously going to be a problem later. It releases a big dark dragon, and what the hell is this Metopia looking ass? How did they screw up a dragon so bad? I can see they're trying to Sonicify it a bit here. I appreciate the idea. I even love that it does a spin attack. Honestly, I wish the end did that. This series is in love with big purple balls lately, so I get the goofy arms and legs and the little shoes on this dumpy idiot, but if they're trying to anthropomorphize a dragon like they would with other Sonic characters, why didn't they do the same for Trip in her dragon form? There is no consistency between the dragon designs in this game. The stupid-ass play school Charizard looking piece of trash. I could describe more of the attacks, but why bother? You're supersonic, you're invincible. The biggest threat is this fight running down your clock, and yeah, it's frustrating. You spend most of the time just floating around waiting for one of your friends to start dropping rings, and they'll constantly spit out random rings out of nowhere to keep you going. The rest of the time, you're just avoiding any attacks that might push you back during the segments where you have to close in on the dragon when you're finally allowed to hit the damn thing. The rest of the time, just who cares? Stuff is just happening. None of this damages you. The only real damage comes from Sonic himself, because if you boost, it drastically reduces your rings. So I guess don't boost. You don't need to. Yeah, I know there is a little bit of strategy here, but this is one of the weaker Supersonic battles, and it brings out the weaker part of all the boss battles in Superstars with all the waiting you gotta do. But once you beat the boss, that's it. That's the game. You did it. You're done. Now you can go farm medals for multiplayer mode, which you're never going to use. And don't lie to me, you won't. Again, I understand I sound very down on this game, and I think that's partially due to it leaving things on such a sour note. Overall, I genuinely enjoy this game. It is far from perfect, but again, that's okay. Unlike Frontiers, I don't think this is a step in the right direction. I don't think this is a step anywhere. I think this game is already where it needs to be. Yeah, they gotta polish out some bugs and spruce up the multiplayer. Maybe cut down on the time you spend in boss fights. Pull back that camera a little bit. But that aside, it's a genuinely solid Sonic game. Yeah, physics aren't exactly the same as they were in the older games, but I don't feel like I have to force myself to like this, because I absolutely felt like I was doing that while I was playing some of the classic levels in Generations, and I certainly was doing that when it came to Sonic 4 Episodes 1 and 2. Superstars is a good time, and I think it only gets better as you keep playing it. But I also understand those that are frustrated because they saw how good Mania was, despite the strict limitations Sega gave that team. Their talent and their brilliance shined through and gave us an extremely well put together game. And it was obvious if they were given the chance they would go on to make the undisputed king of the classic style games. Hell, they could probably put together the best 3D Sonic game if they were given the chance, but that never happened. Sega tried to work with them a little bit, but ended up going a different direction. They worked with Stealth and Headcanon for Origins, but that became what it became, and then went on to give their first fully original side-scrolling game in ages to the unproven Arzest. And that alone is going to sour people. There's no two ways around it, because Sega had everything they needed to go on to create something truly stellar, something that could stand toe-to-toe with the best that Mario could produce. Mania was a part of Game of the year conversations. Superstars won't be. But again, I can't even be mad knowing all that. I do genuinely believe that Sonic could use more fresh blood. And yes, I do believe that Sega screwed up massively, letting Evening Star slip through their fingers, but hey, who knows what the future holds. They seem to be in good standing with Christian Whitehead's team. They're even thanked in the credits, and Sonic's not going anywhere. Who's to say we don't get another Evening Star game down the road? Even if they don't, I'm still hyped to see whatever that team cooks up. I'm going to be playing that Penny game as soon as it comes out. And as far as Arzest is concerned, they may have finally found their calling. No, it's not the greatest Sonic game ever made, but it's a lot better than a lot of fans are making it out to be. This is a good game. Sure, Arzest could do better, and I genuinely believe they will. Superstars still feels inspired, and it recaptures that colorful creative side of this wonderful universe I've missed for a while. And while I've complained time and again about the old guard when it comes to Sonic Team and Sega and all of that nonsense, I can't help but smile knowing that Takashi Iizuka, Naoto Oshima, and Kazuyuki Hoshino, on top of Jun Seiyotame, all came together to take another crack at the original formula. And I can't believe I'm saying this, I think they still got it. It is a shame that Yuji Naka, notorious as the man has been over the years, wasn't a part of this collaboration, but as much as it breaks my heart to say it, the project was probably better off without him. But all the same, it is kind of lovely that so many of the original creators for this franchise are here and working together once again. Maybe that's what Superstars is actually referring to. Not just the characters that we play in the game, but the people behind the scenes all coming together to give this another go. And hey, it looks like they did work with some of the new blood behind the scenes. Sounds like Christian Whitehead got a chance to play this game before it came out. We know Ian Flynn, Powerhouse Studios, T-Lopes, everybody we've been celebrating that's been headlining a lot of the newer projects also helped with this one. And while we still have a little ways to go to reach that top tier quality I would hope this franchise could once again reach, if this is the standard set for what I can expect from a classic styled Sonic game, I'm going to be a very happy camper. And more importantly than any of that, Metal Knuckles is here, and that's all that matters. Before we wrap up for today, I want to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Jumping online and building up your own brand was always an intimidating thing for me, but Squarespace makes that a streamlined, fast, and easy process, all while making you look good thanks to their Fluid Engine, a next-generation website design tool that lets you tweak any of their many templates with easy-to-use drag-and-drop tools. And I don't need to tell you how useful websites can be, whether you want to build up a portfolio of your work, an art gallery, or a shop, because yes, they have everything you need to run your own online business, including analytics that help show you the strongest avenues of growth and help you build up marketing strategies, which include integration with your favorite social media networks. And they can even help you set up an online shop to sell and distribute custom merch. All you have to do is design it and they'll handle production, inventory, and shipping. Really doesn't get any easier than that. And to make it just a bit easier, if you use my link, squarespace.com/gameapologist, you'll get 14 days for free, which is plenty of time to see if this is right for you. And when you want to make a purchase, that same link will get you 10% off your first order. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring the video. Alright, that is going to do it for today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I've rambled for a long time about this game, and I still feel like there is more to discuss, but we'll talk about it when we talk about it. I am going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on some of these robots, so stay tuned for that. And a massive shout out to my friend Channel Pup, who has helped edit this monster of a video. Go check out his stuff. Go check out my boys over at Sunset City. I'm excited to see where they take that show. And hey, if you want to support my channel, you can go check out plenty of other videos. I got a whole bunch of them. You can subscribe or pitch in over on the Patreon. And yes, thank you patrons for supporting me and keeping me alive. And an extra special shout out to these fine folks right here. Kyle Winter, Cyrus the Skeptic, Joseph Duncan, Sonic 2 Blue, is my aka Nick's biggest hero, John, Josh Strider, Monroe Mania, Hatsworth, Tiny Jericho, Ginger Bob, Jack of All Spades, Tristan Trap, Meekers, Dun Dun, Quote Resident Fanboy, Miles the Prower, Singer J199, Mr. Boo J, Sam Webster, Fish Flop, Lucas Lipker, The Bad Pal, Jonathan Dobbs, Haley, Chad, Super Hyper Mecha SP Mark II, Cecil the Glade, The Dark Neon, Stefan Plakanica, 3 Monic, Graham J. Hall, Lenny X, Wayne is Boss, Lederick, Mr. Jubei is ready to 20 these covers in Lagoon City, pronounced Lagoon City, Jimmy Duke STR, The Lumberjack, Trash Bathman, Autumn from Twitter.com or X or whatever, hi Nick, hi Autumn, that Telos Main hanging out at Mystic Mansion, Jinsei Otome, Bowden, I'm not reading that, Enerjack 5, Spades the Nocturne, Ken K of Warheads, Ven 101, Paxton, Bizbee, Sindarin 7, Stevie Cole, Twilord, can you believe it guys, Spider-Man 2, still just a week away, when am I going to get my 19 inches of Venom? Haven't updated that name in a minute, have you, Ad? Paisley, Eric Delgado, Kodinsky, Sayonara Robocop, Crimson Rose, Nix the Kobold, Sonic P, AJ, Municent, Roxas the Cat, Godzilla, Makuta of Salt, Fake Advertising Get, Alexander Watson, Neil Gompa, Conan Kudo, the Lex, the most powerful ship in the 2 universes, Native Nerd 27, Kaido Prower, Swift Cannon, Spearmint, Omega Man 21, Penn Adelaide, the Phantomist, Silver Stars, Daza S, the world's most unironic 8.5 tail stand, one more Sonic robot. SP is currently undergoing an identity crisis, so he created an evil clone SP. MT Mecha, Yasai, Yosef, Gob, Charles the Green Dragon. Bowden here to remind you that manatees are awesome. Bowden, have you subscribed twice to my Patreon? I'm so confused. Anyway, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. Gotta get straight to work on the next video, so I'm gonna get to it. So until next time, toot toot Sonic Superstars.